Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Memis, and I'm pleased to be joined by Ithaca College alumni Collin Schuck. First, the ECHL was initially suspended. 2 days later, it got canceled this season. I guess, did that take you by surprise at all? And I guess, what was your initial reaction to everything?
It didn't surprise me in any way because the night before we had the season suspended, the NBA suspended their season, and I was having conversations with my significant other saying, we're probably not going to play this year for the rest of the year. This is probably going to be it. Why are we even traveling out? And it's funny because our head coach had the same conversations with our boss, and our boss was having the same conversations with the league saying, we're not going to play, are we? Like, this is going to be it. So it didn't surprise us in any way that it happened. It didn't surprise us in the swiftness at which it happened. And it didn't surprise us that, we were going to have a delayed start to the following season. What I think surprised a lot of us was the fact that we have a staff of about 500 people between our organization, which has 3 hotels, our arena, and the hockey team is all part of it. What surprised us is that 80% of us were laid off 2 weeks later, and I think that caught everyone a little off guard just because we didn't think it would ever come to that, but financially, it's just the decision that had to be made, and there's no hard feelings toward that. So that was the more surprising thing, and it also wasn't necessarily surprising for me, at least, to have our team not play last season because of the same situations that are going on, especially considering we could only have a maximum of 50 people in our arena, and financially it wasn't viable to be able to play that next year. So there were a lot of non-surprises. There were a couple things that caught us off guard, but I think the entire scenario was understanding, considering that we are an entertainment entity, and that's what took the biggest hit over the last year and a half was entertainment and the ability for people to go out and do things. And this is an entertainment city, and so without that human interaction, it's very, very difficult to continue to operate in which you did before.
Now, were you one of the people laid off at the time? I know, obviously, you're back with them.
Yes, I was. There was only, I think, 6 people that stayed on, and they were 4 upper-level executives for our team, plus our head coach and our assistant coach. And those 2 stayed on as well, too, because they're contractually obligated, which is different than what all of us are, which is really non-contractual, so to speak, but it's just a rolling employment. So because they have specific guidelines and things that they have to be in place because of the nature of their signing, then they stay on, but everyone's doing non-hockey things over the last year. Even them, they weren't even doing hockey things. They were cleaning carpets, driving shuttles, and helping clean rooms for a year until we actually knew that we could play and have a financially viable season, and then that's when hockey really came back to the forefront again.
Now, I'm curious. I know, obviously, you were kind of let go, but were you kind of guaranteed that, like, when eventually they have a season, that you would be back in your old position?
So from that day that we were laid off, which was March 20th, 2020, they said from the outset, if you want to come back when we're allowed to have everyone back again, you are more than welcome to. And they said that to every single employee. And most of our front office staff did return. There's only 1, maybe 2 that didn't return just because of other things. They had moved on from working in sports. So that was always the guarantee that we would have our positions if we wanted them when we came back. Now, if we decided to do something else and not return, they would understand that as well. But no, it was never a question of being able to come back again. It was just a question of when, just not if.
Well, that's definitely good that you had that ability to know that eventually you'd be able to come back. But I guess, how did you sustain yourself financially during the time where you weren't getting paid by the team?
Well, the first 4 months were nice because I was getting paid unemployment from the federal government and from my state government. And I know a lot of folks didn't agree with the subsidies and just gave it as an excuse for people to be lazy. But those 4 months for me were huge for my mental stability because, let's be honest, this isn't the easiest industry to work in, and then to be right in the middle of the playoff push where we had 11 games left in our season, and then to just hop out of it, and then 2 weeks later you're out of the industry completely until who knows when. It takes a toll on you. So it took a couple of months to really get back into a more normal mindset and headspace, especially considering what was going on with the pandemic, which was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement, which was going on with a lot of other factors. It was a very difficult time that everything seemed to just come together at once. So I was at home for 4 months and getting paychecks, and it was nice to be able to have that time away to be able to break. And then the federal stopped coming in, and so I knew I had to get something because the state was not going to be able to sustain even just my rent by itself. So I worked in retail for 11 months, and everyone did it. Everyone had to pick up a different job or do something different. What everyone did was different depending on who you talk to, but I worked in retail and made it work until the time in which they allowed us back, which is July 1st of this year. And so that's just what you had to do. You have to, like you are in the industry, be adaptable to do it.
Okay. And now, recently that you've been able to broadcast games again, and I guess either when you got the news that they were going to have those games again or when you first broadcasted a game again, I guess, can you describe that experience and feeling?
I remember distinctly opening night this past month was the first hockey game that we had that I was on the air, and it was the first game that had meaning, that had more than just like a season ticket holder base or was more than just alumni. And I sat there, and for the first time, I think since I got my pro job debut with Idaho, I just soaked it in because it didn't feel real. It felt weird in some way. You almost take it for granted for what you're able to do and the operation in which you normally function. I just soaked it in. It was just a night for me to try to just enjoy being back there again, not stress too much about what my color commentator is saying about the technical sides of the radio and the TV broadcast. It was more just, hey, let's go out and let's have some fun, because this is the first time in 20 months I'm able to do this in this specific capacity, and there's no reason not to enjoy your job, because in all seriousness, this is a job, and only maybe 5 to 10% of what I do is actually on-air product. So a lot of times you get caught in the stress of your job, and you don't look at things the way that people assume you should, like thinking this is the best job ever, this is everyone's dream to be, or everyone has a fantasy about it. And that's true, but it's still a job. It's still a way to make a living, and it's not a living that you get paid a lot to do, so there's a lot of stresses that come both within the walls and outside the walls of what you do. So first time back, it felt weird because you're still masking up. You still have all these regulations and policies for the players to keep them separated from everybody else, to avoid getting a breakthrough case that runs through a locker room. And you're part of that too. You're part of that bubble. So there's other stresses, and there's a lot of things in the build-up the 2 weeks beforehand with a fight night the following night and these other events. There was no time to really soak it in. And then it was there and it was in front of you. And I couldn't believe that we were back at this point again, considering what still all is going on, that we still have so much length to go with the pandemic, but we're able to be here, and I'm actually here again. It didn't feel real for a little bit, and thankfully it was one of the most fun games I was able to do because of the on-ice product, but the entire spectacle of it, and it was a city coming together and finally getting back together and doing something that they've been wanting to do for a while, and it was the first sellout we had in probably over a decade. And I think that shows everything else, that folks want to return to normalcy. And even though there is no former normal of what it was, you can still have the same kind of enjoyment of doing things from what I call the before times that you're able to do now that we are, in the middle of the pandemic, but we are now more functioning like what we were beforehand.
My final question I have is, I guess, what have you taken away from this kind of whole experience, if there is anything?
What it's taught me is twofold. One, that honestly, media people are expendable, and they're usually one of the first ones on the chopping block because they're not a direct revenue source and because a lot of folks don't understand the value of what you do. And yes, it's your job to show the value of what you do, but it's very difficult to show that to people who don't want to see the value of what you do. So part of it is responsible upon the other person and not just on yourself to sell yourself completely and make you feel like you made a deal with the devil just to be able to do the job that you want to do and that you know is needed to be done, but people see that as an accessory. But the second thing, too, is that personally, I've understood the value of taking care of yourself. I have been a giver for most of my life. I have been someone who's wanted to entertain and to please other people for most of my life. And I've battled with the high ups and the high downs of this industry, and I've battled with the mental health of it. I've gone through spouts of seasonal depression. I've gone through major anxiety issues, and you've wanted to deny that before, but you're forced to confront them when you're cooped up in an apartment for 4 months and you can't do anything else except just be there and exist without what saved you from thinking about those things. So I really, really value the mental side of everyone and what that does to someone and how that shapes someone's goals and their futures. So that's probably the biggest thing is making sure that you take care of yourself, because at the end of the day, you're going to be the only one that can really, truly do that, and you have to make sure that you're doing that, because if you're not, I guarantee you it's going to be very difficult for someone else to do that for you, and you cannot expect someone else to do that for you. It's in the same way that, you think about helping people. You can only help people if you yourself are taken care of first. If you're not to your 100% yourself, you can't take care of other people. You can't entertain other people the same way that you would if you were 100% toward yourself. So, taking care of number one is most important, and that's why on a day like today, we were told to not come into the office, and for the first time, I actually didn't come into the office, even though I still have work to do. But that's just some of the small steps that I'm taking to help myself continue on and move forward, because so many people crash and burn out of this industry because of that reason in particular. And I'm trying to avoid that as much as possible, because I am a crash and burn mentality. I have that addictive personality, so to speak. So to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, that is now the number one focus for me moving forward with my career and whatever I do, because I can't enjoy the things that I enjoy without being 100% full to myself.
Thank you, Collin. For WICB Sports, I'm Michael Memes.